So it's happened again. The Neural Quad Cortex has been delayed. It was meant to come out in November 2020, got pushed back to December 2020. It was meant to come out in January 2021, and then it got pushed back to February. And now that we're in the middle of February, it's being pushed back once again to March 2021. And I fully appreciate the difficult situation that Neural Quad Cortex are in and the fact how crazy the world is right now. Everyone's working from home, and then on top of that, Neural Quad Cortex are trying to release and launch a brand new product. But with all that aside, I really truly am starting to lose confidence in my Neural Quad Cortex and whether I should keep my pre-order active. And I'm not just making this video for dramatic purpose, for YouTube and for views. I genuinely just want to share my thoughts on this situation. Now, a quick disclaimer, just so you can get a bit of perspective on my opinion in today's video. I have watched pretty much every single pre-release review on the Neural Quad Cortex here on YouTube to really try and gauge what everyone's saying about the product and be as educated as possible for creating today's video. Now, I'm not going to be biased in any way whatsoever to particular YouTubers. I was very impressed by both Rhett Scholl's and Paul David's review. And I may defend Paul David's a little bit in today's video because I do think he's getting way too much hate for the thoughts he shared on the product. And I think he was very honest and genuine. So let's first start with the build quality of the Neural Quad Cortex. Now, from Rabia's video, I was truly impressed with the overall construction of the device. However, the foot switches have got me really concerned. Now, back in, I think, November, October time of 2020, Sweetwater released a video, and this was demoing the Neural Quad Cortex. And one of my major apprehensions from watching like the first 60 seconds of that video was the fact the foot switches looked like they were very susceptible to breakage. And Rhett Scholl mentioned this inside of his video as well, which kind of confirmed my first impressions from that video a few months ago. Now, a really cool feature of the foot switches is the fact they duplicate and double up as parameter changes. So you can change the bass, the tone, the gain level of your amplifier, your pedal, whatever you are using. Very innovative and genius idea. But there's something about them that's extremely wobbly, and I really aren't too sure whether power users that are going to be stomping on these a lot are going to be able to sustain the amount of work load that they're going to take, and whether this is going to be a huge RMA issue on the device in a few months' time once people start extensively using it. May not be a problem, but they're not the most sturdy foot switches I've seen in my life. Now, another point that Paul Davids mentioned in his video was the lack of DSP processing power the Neural Quad Cortex has. Now, obviously, the Neural Quad Cortex markets itself as the world's most powerful floorboard unit. And obviously what it's mostly referring to here is the fact it can run 4 amplifiers simultaneously. Now, this is a feature that has got me really excited personally for my setup over here because I do live looping. This means I could have one guitar processing device that could be for my bass guitars, my electric guitars, even my acoustic guitars for running particular effects, all from one audio source going directly into my loop pedal. However, what he raised was the fact that there is a limit on the amount of effects blocks you can be running simultaneously on the unit, which then made me question how powerful is the 4 amplifiers you can run simultaneously, because obviously if there's a limit on how many effects blocks you can run, that means the more amplifiers you have loaded in at once, the less effects blocks you can run per amplifier, which is going to restrict you even further in your effects chain and the types of effects that you can run simultaneously. Now, coming from the Bosch GT1000 core that we recently checked out, you can check out my full review that I released a few days ago, that can run 24 simultaneous effects blocks. And I never truly appreciated how much headroom the Bosch GT1000 core series had until I bought the GT1000 core and been testing it over the past 4 months. And I now really appreciate the importance of having so much power on the internal chip, especially coming from the Kemper Profiler previously, not having a lot of limitations in its processing power aspect of things. GT1000 Core really opened and unlocked a new level of potential. And I'm really disappointed that it appears the Neural Quad Cortex may have a lot of restrictions in the types of effects blocks you can combine with one another due to the lack of processing power of the DSP chip. Now, something else that Paul David mentioned in his video that really took me by surprise was the dropout when loading into the next patch. Now, obviously on the Neural Quad Cortex, you may have a rhythm patch for your rhythm tone, and then you may boot into a secondary patch for your guitar solo lead tone. And what apparently happens is on the Neural Quad Cortex, as you boot into that next preset patch, there is a dropout in audio. So if you play a chord and you boot into the next patch, the audio would cut off and the audience wouldn't hear your guitar anymore, which is absolutely awful, if we're brutally honest, for a device in 2021.
So let's say you're having fun playing your deluxe reverb. You're playing live on stage and there's your solo spot. Okay. Wait a second. So there's an audio dropout when you go from one preset to the other. And the more is going on in a preset, you see there's a lot of blocks going on, the longer the dropout is. And I don't like that.
So let's talk about some of the major issues of the Neural Quad Cortex. Now, for full transparency, most of these have came from Paul David's video. Now, by no means am I a Paul David's fanboy and I'm defending him, and I think he is only 100% correct. To be brutally honest, I hardly even watch the guy. Puts together some insane videos. Now, something that he raised, which is a major oversight on the Neural Quad Cortex, is the lack of a global parameter for the output options. Now, on the Neural Quad Cortex, there's a whole heap of outputs on the back of the device. We've got XLR left and right, we've got some guitar jack outputs, and obviously, depending on what venue you're playing in, one night you may be using XLR out because you want that better quality of the XLR, better ground and all that type of stuff. But then in other nights, you may be playing in a smaller venue and there's not enough space in the mixer for you to take up an XLR slot. So you have to use guitar jack cables. Well, what happens here is, because there's no master global parameter to say, right, the Neural Quad Cortex is outputting everything out of 1 and 2, or it's outputting everything out of 3 and 4, you have to individually go into each preset and change the output source and then save that, which is totally ridiculous. Imagine if you have 25 presets in a full set list for the night. You've got a really big set, couple of hours show, and you have to change those individually and then change them all again the next night, depending on what mixing console is available from the front of house engineer. Now, another concerning feature, or lack of a feature on the Neural Quad Cortex as well, is the lack of a multi-assign on your foot switches. Now, obviously you can fully remap and reassign all of the different foot switches to turn off certain stomp boxes, certain delays, whatever it is you're trying to do, but you cannot map multiple stomp boxes and effects blocks to one single foot switch. So let's say you want to click one foot switch in to turn on your overdrive, your delay, your reverbs, and whatever else you're using for your guitar solo. You can't do that. You would have to like click 4 foot switches individually. Now, obviously you could change scene and all that type of stuff. That would be a solution to that issue. But it's just something that is a bit of an oversight for people that want to run it in more of a stomp box style format. So let's talk about some of the things that I am still excited about with the Neural Quad Cortex. Now, the first thing is neural capture. Now, I'm not talking too much about capturing a valve amplifier and all that type of stuff. We've had that technology for like the past 10 years from Kemper Profiler. Although neural capture does do a better job, it's a longer and more detailed process from what I've seen inside of Pete Thorne's video, Paul David's, Rhett Scholl's, all those guys had much better results than what you get out of the Kemper. I'm actually talking about the neural capture for guitar pedals. Now, for the first time ever, we now have the ability to capture and profile the characteristics of individual pedals, like distortion pedals primarily is what they're aiming at the very beginning. Now, you can also kind of do it with fuzz pedals from what I saw on Anderton's channel, but he didn't really do a very good job compared to the distortion pedals. Now, I don't know whether you can capture like things like choruses, delays, reverbs, all that type of stuff. I think that might come in the future as this technology develops. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comment section below. I'm sure a lot of people probably already have. But the capturing of the distortion pedals looks really, really cool. This is a feature that's very innovative and it's got me really excited to test out, and we'll be doing some videos on that here on the channel. Now, one of the final things that I am glad to see that Neural DSP have included with the Quad Cortex, and I'm not joking about this, but I'm glad to see that they have included a USB Type-B cable. Now, a lot of companies, you buy a really expensive device and then they don't even give you something as cheap and simple as a USB cable to just connect it to your computer as easy as possible for updating it and using their companion software. So it's nice that they've included that because a lot of competitors don't, and it costs them literally nothing to throw that in the box, but it makes your life a little bit easier. So let's close out today's video with some of my final thoughts. Now, from a customer perspective, I'm really disappointed and really irritated with the whole situation of the Neural Quad Cortex. I'm getting tired of it being delayed, and I'm also no longer hyped about the product. I'm really, really not hyped about it whatsoever. Now, if I didn't have this YouTube channel, I'd have cancelled my pre-order ages ago. And there'd have been a good chance that I probably wouldn't have even placed the pre-order anyways, because I'm really happy about the GT1000 core. The GT1000 core is a lot cheaper, and it does everything I need in a smaller package. Now, the reason for the delay, according to Anderton's in my email that I got, is because Neural Quad Cortex are testing out the cloud stability, the cloud feature stability. Now, obviously, the Neural Quad Cortex has an app and you can share your tones to the cloud and the community can download your tones. You can download other people's tones, like almost a social media of guitar nerds and guitar tones. My honest opinion, I really do not care one bit about this feature. I just would rather have my Neural Quad Cortex here in the studio so I could play around with it, create my own tones, and actually start using it. I couldn't care less about this sharing and cloud feature. If it was something that they released the units now, because apparently they have thousands of them built, they would release the unit and then release the app in 6 months' time once it's ready, I'd be much happier with that situation. Couldn't care less about this cloud feature at all. Might be really cool and I might change my mind once I test it out, but it's not essential for me personally in my day-to-day guitaring life. Now, I know most of my apprehensions and fears of the Neural Quad Cortex that I've mentioned in today's video. Probably 90% of them could be fixed in future firmware updates that Neural Quad Cortex may release, because it's basically a software-based product and they can do whatever they like in a multitude of different ways in the future, redesign the whole user interface in general and how the chip utilizes the power to make it more efficient, all that type of stuff. I fully appreciate those factors, but I wanted to raise them in a video and talk about it because, to be honest, I feel like Paul Davids was getting way too much hate than what was deserved. His video was fantastic and he illustrated some factors and some points about the product that nobody else was willing to share. But with that said, be sure to like and subscribe for my review of the Neural Quad Cortex and the comparison against the Kemper Profiler and the GT1000 Core. But as always, I've been Ben Rowlands. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you in the next one.